I was born in Gibraltar.
I'm originally from Gibraltar.
I've lived in Gibraltar since 1977.
I've never been accosted by a monkey.
Monkeys?
They've screamed at me and stuff, and I've never been attacked by them.
All of a sudden, just monkey just jumped on his head and started pulling on his hair.
Two types of wind.
The Poniente and the Levante.
I have long hair. You can actually wake up and say, today's easterly wind, just by how my hair looks.
I like Morrison's.
The fish and chips. It's the best of both worlds, the UK culture and obviously the Spanish.
Spain, Gibraltar, Spain, Gibraltar.
Mark Steele's in town.
Thank you so much, and welcome to Mark Steele's in Town, which this week, extraordinarily enough, comes from a cave in the middle of the rock of Gibraltar. And this is the furthest I've ever been with this show, and it is so exciting at last to get away to lovely Spain. That is the only possible way of opening that show. No, I'm only joking, Gibraltar. I don't mean to be insensitive at all. Please let me introduce myself properly and politely. Bienvenidos a Mark Steele's in Town. Que esta semana ha venido a exótico Gibraltar. Es tan emocionante venir hasta España. Now, one of the first things that you can't help noticing when you come to this country of Gibraltar is it is tiny. Now, obviously, if you're going to try and squeeze a whole country into an area that's only 2 miles long, it makes perfect sense to choose somewhere where 90% of the place is an uninhabitable cliff face. The next thing is, while you love to embrace the continental Mediterranean culture, if you look carefully around Gibraltar, you can still spot the odd hint of Britishness. There are British phone boxes and British policemen and 40 cafes and pubs with huge boards that say, British fish and chips! In case you're worried, they'll give you some horrible foreign fish with a herb on it. And there's a chocolate shop that says, British chocolate! Because who wants chocolate from Europe? What do they know about chocolate? And you expect the chemist to go, we sell British anusole! You don't want nothing Spanish going up there! And the whole country, at first glance, can appear to be like one long duty-free shop. In the shop windows, there are barrels of vodka for 60 pence and boxes of 8,000 fags with a sign on them saying, just take them, we don't want money. They just take up space, just take them. So it's a wonderfully unique country that from one end to the other, I could do the whole country in one sentence. It goes lighthouse, mosque, cannon, rock, monkeys, cannon, fort, pub, duty-free shop, cannon, duty-free shop, cannon, runway, high street, other bit of runway, Spain. Even so, the first thing that strikes you here is the views from Gibraltar are stunningly beautiful, because once you're up the hill, you can see Spain, which is really nice. Now, Gibraltar is, of course, tied with Britain, but not to the Britain that British people live in. When someone who's been brought up here goes to Britain, they must think, I don't understand, I've been here 3 hours, not a single aeroplane has crossed the high street. There's all sorts of things that are different. One thing I love here, though, is a lot of the Britain that you're attached to, like the telephone boxes and the British bobbies, is a Britain from the 1970s that doesn't really exist anymore. Those phone boxes have gone. The big English breakfast, you don't get so much in England now. Lots of the pubs you have here in England, they'd have shut. And you're going to get such a shock when you find out what happened to Rolf Harris. This is the charm of Gibraltar. It's like a slightly warped England from 38 years ago. You can still buy Spam here. You dip chips in cocktail sauce as if you're thinking, it's pink, it must be exotic. It's so 1970s. There's a dummy in the Glasshouse T-shirt printing shop that everyone loves because it has huge breasts. I bet all the blokes say things like, I wouldn't mind sailing between them pillars of Hercules. And there's some quaint customs here that are from the 1870s, such as the amount of tax you pay. Although you don't really pay tax, it's more of a tip, isn't it? We leave the government £10 a year just as a gesture of goodwill. But Gibraltar is most famous for being a rock, and right now we happen to be in a theatre in the caves in the middle of the Rock of Gibraltar. Top that question time. These caves are... This is honestly, I've been doing this job quite a while. This is the first time I've ever been unable to get into the dressing room because of monkeys. It is extraordinary, and I'll talk to someone later about these caves and the rock, because it does cover almost all the country, the Rock of Gibraltar. That's about 2 miles long, with 30,000 people living here, surrounded on 3 sides by Spain and on the 4th by sea, which is why everybody has made sure over the years that relations with Spain are always friendly and full of good spirits. For example, it seems the guards at the border with Spain frequently go out of their way to make sure hundreds of you spend a delightful 4 hours enjoying the wonderful view of the back of the airport without moving an inch. The drip just comes straight past. I'm 5% stalactite now. Now, I'd like to introduce someone who I'm sure lots of you know, Tito, who gives a guided tour of the caves. What was the story he was telling me yesterday about someone who was stuck in the...
in the queue.
In the queue.
Well, it was a friend of mine who was going across to Spain, and the policeman there, the Spanish policeman, said, look, you can't come in here. I said, why not? He says, because that photograph in the passport is not you. He said, look, mate, this was me when I started in the queue, you know?
Thanks, Tito. Well, I'll be talking to Tito later on about the caves, but I like the way lots of you go to such lengths to bring the cultures together by speaking in this sort of half Spanish, half Englishy sort of language. I love you sort of hear conversations with people who are saying things like, the sunset there is colour of love, bellissimo, but a leaking doy, careful of getting squashed by plane in the high street, el reloj. El reloj, der Mateo no tiene cuerda. You can walk up rock, but watch the bleeding monkeys. Muchas mono, the right pain in the arse, steal your twigs if you're not careful. Norma de la lata del mañana, uno bueno deos. Begin with full English breakfast with egg, chips, bacon, black pudding, fried slice, dos grande te, por favor. I went over the border. I went over there last night into Spain. It's so weird. You walk across the runway. This isn't normal Gibraltar. If you come onto the runway in a plane rather than walking across it, when you get it, it's a fun landing, isn't it? It's slightly alarming before you set off. If you look up Gibraltar runway on the internet, the 2 things that come up are 7 most extreme airports and world's scariest runways. So as you come into land, you hear, this is your captain speaking. We're currently descending into Gibraltar Airport. We'll be scraping against the side of the mountain. You may feel the odd bump, then we'll be lost in the mist for a minute, then we go upside down before landing on a runway that's around half the length of the plane. And you like it like that. The tourist brochures say things like, you'll love the terrifying approach to the airport. The never to be forgotten fun of desperately ringing your loved ones. But now everything's confused, isn't it? Because the British people you so much want to be a part of have gone and turned you over because they voted to leave the EU. So the people of a country that likes to be more British than the British have said to the British, no, hang on, don't be that British, or we might end up not being British. In general, though, the more that places went, we're British, fly the Union Jack and be proud, the more they voted to leave. And the more liberal and middle class they were, the more they voted to stay. Which technically makes Gibraltar now the most namby-pamby, politically correct, metrosexual place in the world. One thing we should clear up before we go any further for anyone listening. There are many people, it seems, who seem to believe that Gibraltar is an island. Now, obviously, these are people who have no idea about anything that happens outside Britain. For example, the London Foreign Office, who recently placed this advert for a job in Gibraltar. History plays an intrinsic part in this area of European affairs and considered alongside the Ireland's long-standing sovereignty dispute. The Ireland? What What sort of foreign office is that? It's only tiny, it must be an island. Like India. Maybe someone from the Foreign Office tried to sail right round it and went, well, no wonder these Gibraltar types are annoyed with the Spanish. The buggers have blocked the sea up. The main worry now, of course, about the EU is how it affects your dealings with Spain. And you get a lovely sense of how well you get along from newspaper columns like this one in the Panorama. Before 711 AD, Gibraltar had various rulers. Then we were in the hands of the Moors for 751 years, ruled by Spain for only 200 years, and been British for 310 years. If anybody has an historic claim to Gibraltar, it's the Moors. So to annoy the Spanish, let's go for joint sovereignty with Morocco. And you would do that. Just for the devilment of it, you would do that. I love how you had a referendum in 1967 on whether to become part of Spain, and the result was 12,138 against and 44 for. But what's nice is you don't make a big fuss about it at all. Except for the fact that one of the main bridges in the centre of town is called the Referendum Gate. And that, I think, leads on to 44 Traitors Avenue. You celebrate the 1967 referendum result with a National Gibraltar Day, a marvellous occasion with spectacular displays, such as the one this year, which was reported like this. Casemeat was to be showered in petals dropped from a helicopter. But the helicopter pilot missed his mark and petals ended up in the marketplace, missing the square altogether. I mean, who could possibly have predicted that petals near a helicopter might go in haphazard directions? Now, here is a question I feel I have to ask. Why does anybody bother having a car here? The whole country's about 9 feet long. To be fair, not all of you do go everywhere by car. Some of you decide to be healthy and go by moped. There's a book called The Best of Gibraltar, a tourist book, and it says, beware of scooters, they make a mockery of the rules of the road. And some people have described the mopeds to me as insects, and they must be annoying if everybody thinks, I don't mind planes driving up and down the road, it's the bikes that annoy me. I like the moany aspect of it here. I love that it helps your claim to be British. And I love the way British tourists come here and have their pictures taken next to a phone box. That's a proper holiday when you can go, oh, look, they've got the same stuff we have in Croydon. And this is why the Best of Gibraltar tourist book explains proudly, for most visitors, a trip to the top of the rock is essential. With luck, a nuclear submarine may be spotted. A day out if you've not spotted a nuclear submarine. I was in Paris once, went to the top of the Eiffel Tower, didn't see one. Asked for me money back. The website gibraltartourism.com says, this is what it says, Morrison's of Gibraltar is a tourist attraction. Trip coaches and families from the Costa del Sol travelling by car flood into Gibraltar for their Marmite and Heinz. What's the matter with people? It's a shop. Do people really go, oh, it was worth travelling across an entire continent, risking our lives on the world's scariest runway, because we went on a trip to a shop identical to the one we go to in Luton every Friday. Does it have a gift shop? I know it's got a bar. Whoever told you it was British for Morrison's to have a bar was winding you up. Did they also say, in Britain, all our Marks and Spencers have a ski slope? The effort to keep this Morrison's thing going is extraordinary. There are 18 lorries at any time driving between Britain and Gibraltar to keep the Morrison's stocked. And also some idiot can spend a week getting here on a cruise ship and go, oh, look, they've got Frosties and take them back where they started. I believe a bar in the Morrison's. Do people go out there? Where should we go tonight? I think we maybe go to Morrison's. But Gibraltar has always attracted tourists and celebrity tourists, going back hundreds of years. Writers come here. Lord Byron, celebrated romantic poet, came here on his tour of Europe, and he wrote about it saying, Gibraltar is the dirtiest, most detestable spot in existence. H.G. Wells came here on a romantic weekend with his partner Rebecca, and they enjoyed this idyllic time. He got a sore throat and lay in bed screaming at her, saying the sore throat was going to kill him, until a priest heard him and thought that H.G. Wells was being so horrible he gave Rebecca the money to sail back to London on her own. It's just amazing what a little trip to Gibraltar can do to keep a spark going in a relationship. William Thackeray said, at evening, the place becomes quite romantic. So it's a bit better, isn't it? And then he went on, because it's too dark to see all the dust. And the caves that we're in are extraordinary. You just sort of stand here amidst these amazing, twirly, psychedelic shapes, and sometimes a drop of water falls on you. And you know in 50,000 years that's going to be a stalagmite, and that seat there will be restricted view. So now, at this point, I'd like to once again talk to Tito. So you give people guided tours around the caves.
We have another cave further down. It's a pity that it's because it's very restricted that not a lot of people see it, but you can see it on the web.
But you can take people down there?
Oh yes, we do take people. It's an adventure. To me, it's the jewel in the crown of Gibraltar. I don't fit there anymore because as I get older, I'm getting fatter. And I actually have a photo of me stuck in the hole. Not many people know, but we do have a secret tin of Vaseline down there, just in case, you know.
That would be so embarrassing, wouldn't it? The person who had to be KY jellied out of the cave.
That is the most beautiful thing we have in Gibraltar to show, and we are very privileged to be in such a place in the world.
All right, thanks very much to Tito. What a great... The Rock of Gibraltar has for thousands of years been guarding the Mediterranean in a way, and by 1300 there were about 1,000 people living here. King Ferdinand IV of Castile began a siege of Gibraltar, but in the end the siege was won because the Spanish king managed to capture a Morrison's lorry and everyone surrendered. So the British Navy, along with the Dutch, arrived in 1704 during one of the wars with Spain, and they built a fortress here, and in 1713 they negotiated the Treaty of Utrecht. The first condition demanded by the Spanish is if the British were going to have a port here, the ships would have to cross the high street. And then they demanded that Gibraltar, along with Minorca, was annexed to the British Crown as a reward for all the effort that Britain had put in to defeat the Spanish. And the deal was that an extent of country around Gibraltar equal to 2 cannon shots be ceded to England. And I just said, why didn't you use a bigger cannon? You could have had another half mile and put a Lidl on there. There are various theories as to why the British managed to dominate the Spanish at this time, and one possibility was put forward by an American traveller called Henry Field, who came here in the 1800s, and he witnessed the attempt by the Spanish to win Gibraltar back, and he wrote, I quote, "The Spaniards began their fire at daybreak and continued without cessation. Then they suddenly stopped at noon. We wondered why. Then discovered the soldiers were asleep." For what Spaniard may be deprived of his siesta? Now, I'm interested, do you have siestas here? No. See, now you've lost out there, haven't you? Now here, if you're tired in the afternoon, you've got to pop across the border for a kip. And once the Suez Canal was opened, Gibraltar became even more important, as you could pop through to the east from here. So the British built the naval harbour to protect the routes, and a 100-ton gun was built that was claimed is so accurate it can kill a single goose in a flock 4 miles away. Why didn't you use that gun to decide the size of your country? That first street in La Linea that smells of dope, that could have been yours. But the most dramatic episode must have been in the Second World War. The Second World War came as a huge shock to Gibraltar because as you're 38 years behind the rest of Europe, you hadn't had the First World War yet. Now, at the start of the war, the whole civilian population was evacuated. Thousands were sent away, many of them to Jamaica, which must have complicated the dialect even more, mustn't it? Those ones must have come back making English comments in Spanish in a Jamaican accent. Gibraltar siempre será British. the end of the war, gradually everyone who'd been sent away was allowed back here to then once again enjoy a peaceful life half a mile away from a country 10,000 times bigger than you, ruled by General Franco. Franco seemed to get especially cross in 1969 and he closed the border completely. And then someone at the back 3 years later said, this queue's moving even slower than normal. Something that has amazed me here, though, even in this tiny country, is that there is a quiet bit. At the far end, right opposite Africa, are some cottages. And Rebecca here, so you live in one of the cottages by the lighthouse.
Yes. They say it's the last house in Europe.
It must be.
Tarifa is more southern, but then there's no houses built on the southern tip.
Oh, yeah, it'd
So
be gutting if
it's
someone moves there, wouldn't it? But now also, on the other side of the rock from the town, there's one road, and then that's where the beaches are.
Yeah.
There's a sort of culture about the beaches, isn't there, that you have to...
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
So is that right? So how does that work?
You go to the same beach for your whole life, but then there's this, we call it a compromiso, where if you marry someone and they go to Eastern Beach, but your family goes to Caleta, then you're in trouble.
You just love a territorial conflict, don't you? Now, one other thing I have to ask you about, I think this is fascinating to anyone who's not here. There are two sorts of wind. Levante, Poniente. So Levante is from the east, and then Poniente from the west. There's sort of different sorts of wind. So the Levante wind, you can't put your washing out, is that right?
And everyone has this thing, it's like Levanta hair. Don't go to the hairdressers when there's a Levanta, because your hair is just ruined.
I went to the hairdressers and I just booked it up on a Levante day. I don't know what I was thinking. I was told that one effect of a Levante wind is it makes it impossible to make a lemon meringue pie. Have you heard that? That it collapses during a... Has anybody heard that? As someone's winding me up. How does it make its way into the oven? How does it do that? It comes from Levant. So is this ISIS causing this? Are they wafting the wind? Ha 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 ha! Now we're busted in Gibraltar, the meringue collapse. Ha ha ha! Thanks very much to Rebecca. The most amazing discovery in recent years, however, is not how modern Gibraltar is, but how old it is. Because it's now believed that this was where the Neanderthals died out. There was a study from 2000 suggested the last Neanderthals were living in a cave in Gibraltar, maybe this very cave, only 24,000 years ago. Although to them, it would have seemed like 24,038 years ago. It's almost poetic, I think, that the place where the last Neanderthals lived is the only place in Europe where humans try to live side by side with wild monkeys. It's wonderful, though, when you see how closely they imitate the humans that they see. I saw one open and drink a bottle of Lucasade yesterday. They've got one section at the far end of the rock where they make the other apes queue for 4 hours before letting them in. People know this story from the Olive Press. A woman from Macclesfield has complained about the police in Gibraltar. She went to the local station to report that she'd been sexually assaulted by an ape. And said, while the policeman said he was sorry for my ordeal, he told me monkeys are wild animals and asked, do you think you could pick out the monkey in a lineup? Now you're becoming known for more than apes, though, in Gibraltar, because Gibraltar has a football team that plays in the World Cup. And there's even a football league in Gibraltar with 2 divisions. But every single match is played at the same ground because there's only room for one pitch. And the ground is right by the airport and right under the rock. And I saw Bruno's Magpies play Boca Juniors in a crowd of about 80. Mike is here, who is the...
Sponsor, let's call it
sponsor
Yeah.
of the Bruno Magpies.
Indeed, yeah.
There's this sort of wonderful little attempt to make it more popular by providing not just a ticket, but...
Bruno's, where you went the other night, they had a football team, so we thought, let's sponsor it as a business. And by giving out some free burgers and free beer, it's quite amazing. People come along. And so...
That's wonderful bribery. I mean, Chelsea should do this.
So in that way, we managed to entice people to come and watch the team, and now we've got sort of real fans of a real football club. We still give free burgers and free beer.
Oh, also, what were you telling? Because it's right next to the airport, isn't it? And
the youth teams and the ladies teams play there, and they kept kicking the football over the fence, which meant that some of the planes couldn't land when there was a bouncing ball.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Mike. Thanks for the other night. But now this, Gibraltar, I'm disappointed in you. Despite not being an island, Gibraltar is a regular in the Ireland Games, which it won in 2007. So you don't mind being an island when it suits you. And in answer to those who claim there's no culture, many residents find marvellously creative and imaginative ways of smuggling tobacco. It may, of course, be possible that the enormous amount of tobacco bought in Gibraltar isn't for smuggling and it's just for people here to smoke. But according to an EU investigation, every resident of Gibraltar would have to smoke 9 packs a day, including babies. This is the future for Spain and Gibraltar. All hostilities will be ended once you get together in harmonious petty crime. So, thanks very much to everyone. The last 4 days has been just so wonderfully hospitable, and thanks very much. And I will leave this small but very proud nation with these words written by H.G. Wells when he was here in his famous work of science fiction, The Time Machine, which most people agreed was inspired by his time on the Rock. As I pass through the streets and converse with the vibrant and vivacious local people, I wonder what it would be like to build a time machine capable of taking you backward in time. Exactly 38 years. To a time when apes walked the streets and vodka was 4p a bucket. Back to when the main square in the country was somewhere to get British fish and chips and watch a bloke wafting bubbles. I began to construct such a contraption, though parts were hard to come by. If only there was a Morrison's, I exclaimed. Eventually, in awe at my new surroundings, I tried to absorb the majesty of my destination, an environment I have never before encountered. Flushed with excitement, I approach a native and exclaim, "Here, mate, could you take a picture of me by this phone box?" Thank you very much.
Mark Steele's In Town was written and performed by Mark Steele with additional material by Pete Sinclair, and it was produced in Gibraltar by Carl Cooper. It was a BBC Studios production.